Hi there. So in this video I'm just going to give you a quick overview of how to create a table in a MySQL database using PHP and just give you a quick overview of some of the data types you might use and I guess a reminder of some of the good practices that you should be following. So just to begin with, I'm just going to create a database here I'm using WAMP server actually. So here I am in PHP I'm just going to call it my database. And when I go into it, you can see there are no tables at all. So that's that easy to create the database. But in terms of the tables, we should really plan this. So I'm just going to come to a blank screen and actually try and plan this out. So if we think this is my first table, I'm just going to call it person, because it's going to be a table full of people. And what we have to think is, first of all, how are we going to identify people? Now, you'd think naturally it would be by name, but actually we really shouldn't do that because there is a chance that people can have duplicate names. So what we're going to do is identify them by number. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a field called person ID, which will be a number, an integer. So the first person will be 1 and second person will be 2 and so on. So when we're actually calling on them to get that information, we're actually going to call them by number, not by name. So that's the first thing, is their ID. The second thing, I guess, is probably their name. In this case, I'm not too worried about what should we do? We'll put in first name, put in last name, maybe we'll put date of birth. So I'm just going to put DOB for date of birth. And what else do we want there? We might want... I'm trying to think what data types. So we've got their date of birth. Maybe we'll have a phone number and probably height. We'll go for height. And we'll do that in meters. So there we go. So we've got a bit of information about people. Now the next thing is we've got to think, what data types are we going to be using for them? Now the person ID is clearly going to be a number data type, so I'm going to put that as being an integer. The name, first name and last names are both going to be some form of text. Now there's a couple of text types and we'll talk about the different types, but in this case here I'm going to use varchar. The date of birth is clearly going to be a date. The phone number will be integer as well, it will be a number, and the height, which will do, like, for example 1.75 meters or something like that, we're going to do that one as a decimal. Okay, so that's our plan for our table. So let's go back into PHP MyAdmin and have a look at that. So let's create our table called person, which has, let me think, 1, 2, 3, 6 fields. And let's go ahead and we'll just put them in. So the person, the identifier, that's an integer. Now when we look at the length or the values, that is the number of characters we can have. If I put 1 for that, that isn't one record, that is one character. So that would go as high as 9, because obviously we can have 9 people, but we're still only using one digit. So say I wanted to have up to 1,000, or maybe 9,999 people in there. That's a length of 4 digits, so that should be plenty for me. When I come along here, things that we need to consider are the fact that in the index box here, I would like this to be my primary key, because this is the primary way that we're going to identify a person, is by this ID number. And the last thing that's probably a good idea to check is, with your primary key, is to set it to be an auto increment. Now that will become more important later as you start to build your own control panels, but when a record is entered into the table, if this is not set to auto increment, it will just be given nothing. It'll just be left blank. Whereas what you want it to do is to say, okay, what's the most recent person we've got in there? It might be person number 1000. In that case, it'll say the next person will have a number 1001, and we don't get any clashes, because this ID here, person ID, should be completely unique. Anyway, the next thing we've got there was the first name, and there are two types here we can have. We have varchar or text. I would just recommend using varchar for when you have smaller amounts of text, and use text option when you're going to have a large amount of text. So if you were doing, say, all the content on a web page, you might want to make that text. But if it's just going to be very short amounts of content, varchar is fine. Now I'm going to set a limit here of, say, 20 characters. Now again, that is the number of characters in the name, so that's up to 20 letters, so that can be quite a long name. I'll do the same with the last name. Again, because that's going to be pretty short, I'll make that varchar. And the next thing we had was date of birth, or DOB. Now, in our data types, there is one called date. Now, there are several here. We have date, which is just, and you can see the little hover over there. It goes from, there's the years, oops, hover over, come up again. Years, month, and then the day. If you do date time, it will have the year, month, date, and then the time immediately after that. So that could be quite useful if you're doing like a calendar type of website. If we're just doing date of birth, clearly we just want the date. Okay. Don't need to specify length, that's set by default. The next thing we had in there, I think, was phone number. So phone, that's just going to be a number. I'm just going to have in there, I guess, as an integer, and I'm just going to make it up to 7 digits long. Now, if you were doing one where there's the possibility people might put area codes in there, then clearly you might want to have more than 7 characters. You might want to blow that out to 12 or something like that, so you can cover an international code as well as an area code. And finally, I had height. And height, in this case, I decided to make a decimal. So if I can find decimal, there it is there. So if you're ever going to be using decimals, the way this goes in there is you have the number of digits there are going to be. So I'm going to put 3 because I can have 1.25 or 1.75, then a comma, and then how many decimal places do you want? So this means that there can be up to 3 digits, which is good because I don't think their height will be more than 9 meters 99. And I can have 2 decimal places. Okay, so that's a quick overview of the various data types. Just a quick, another reminder, you should always have a primary key. So in this case, I've called it person ID. It's set to primary and it is auto increment. There can only be one primary key in a table. Okay, so that's the overview done. I'll save that. And now my table is ready to have information put into it. And there it is, there's the structure all sorted. Right, so next time we'll start doing some stuff with multiple tables.